Hi, this is Robin, Weight Loss Apocalypse. It's a beautiful Friday, and there was a post on a private Weight Loss Apocalypse emotional eating rehab group on Facebook by actually a patient of my clinic's. I'm not going to mention her name, but she is going through some incredible grief from the loss of her mother, who was an abusive woman. Anyhow, and she's been a chronic dieter, and I don't need to go into her history, but she posted about dealing with depression, of which I have experienced severe depression myself. I know a lot of us out there, if not all of us, have actually dealt with depression. Some of us know they have been depressed. Others are depressed and have no freaking clue. They just think that they're fat and that's what the problem is, so therefore they need to lose weight. And they think that, food is their addiction, and they're not depressed, but they're just addicted to food. But anyhow, I really want to talk about this concept of addiction. I've actually, in the exercise industry, had lots and lots of clients who were chronically depressed, and they exercised because they felt like it was their daily dose of feel good, which is absolutely true. And I recommend activity, especially outdoors, if you're in the dumps. However, I do not recommend exercise for lots of reasons, because exercise should not be used to compensate for anything, because it is a narcotic, a dopamine stimulant, a pleasure center of the brain stimulant. It could be easily quote-unquote addictive, meaning if it's used for emotional compensation. In fact, every single thing on the face of this planet is addictive if it stimulates the pleasure center of the brain. And I am one of those people that does not believe that you should avoid all pleasure in the world and be fearful of all pleasure and anything that stimulates pleasure because you're afraid of being an addict. In fact, anyone who tells you something is addictive has never been addicted. Or they're not willing or humble or aware enough to know that true addiction is an emotional problem, a spiritual problem, and no, you're never controlled. Let me just speak slowly. You are never controlled by an object, action, or thing. Period. You are using something, action, object, or thing, as something that you're using to cope for emotional distress. Any addict who is a true addict will tell you this. If you're not a true addict, you'll tell people that whatever it is you're doing is addictive. It's always a telltale sign that someone truly doesn't know what addiction is. And to tell someone, oh, don't touch that because it's addictive, that's a sign. Trust me. I know what it is to be an addict. I get it. I've been there. And let me tell you, yes, there are certain things that are more stimulating of dopamine and more better at compensating for feeling like crap, for sure. On a scale, there is definitely a scale where things are not created equally in terms of stimulating dopamine. Some things are more stimulating than others, so I get that. But you've got to understand the context for why you are feeling down in the dumps. There's a difference between a circumstantial depression, where you're dealing with loss, you're dealing with something that is testing your belief systems, something that is conflicting with your belief systems, but is the truth. And life that is proving wrong your idea of what it's supposed to be like. that is very different than having this sense of sadness for no reason at all. So I think for those of you who are really coping with consistent, repetitive sadness, that you take a very take a good look at the big picture. I had a really good friend who was chronically depressed on medication. Didn't know why, didn't have a concept of why, but come to find out, her marriage sucked. They never had sex. They were married, had 3 kids. She literally had sex like 3 times with the man. She was having psychological problems because she was raped as a young girl, got pregnant, gave her child up for adoption. She was raised in the same religion I was, totally found that it was suppressing, it was indoctrinating. She felt stifled, can't breathe, can't talk by the belief system because it's so controlling. During all of this, she started to deal with severe depression and started working with me as a trainer. Lost a bazillion pounds of weight because I had talked to her about the hunger scale. And we just started being active and working on weightlifting, blah, blah, blah. And she went nutso. At the time, she was like, I don't know why I'm not feeling depressed. And I obviously could understand her living environment being that we went to the same church, and I obviously had left it, but was still involved in the community. So I was free from all that crazy. She was in it and wasn't free and still living in it. Plus she had all this other stuff going on, never dealt with. Come to find out after the fact, the reason why she was depressed was because of all of the baggage she wasn't dealing with, that she had put on a shelf and decided that she couldn't handle it, so she would eat. Yeah. So depression. I don't understand why we don't recommend feeling bad. Because, for me, my depression was extremely severe enough that I was suicidal. Life was not worth living, and I couldn't see a way out. There was no rational way out of the way my brain was wired at the time, because in order to rewire the brain, I was going to have to completely dismantle my identity as a religion, as an athlete. And I know I'm repeating myself, you've heard this before, but those things were so identified as my identity that there was no way to start life over unless I completely let go of those identities and was willing to take the risk of being judged by my parents, which I was to start, and rejected by my family, which I had siblings that were so rude to me. I married outside of my church at 19. We eloped. My husband and I eloped when I was freaking 19. I left a full ride scholarship as an athlete, moved across the country to Massachusetts from Idaho. My poor parents, seriously. They had to have thought that the devil had gotten hold of me. Anyhow, yeah, no wonder I was depressed. And my antidepressant was to lose 10 pounds. My antidepressant was to control my food. My antidepressant was to control my life and isolate myself from reality, because reality was awful. It was hell. That identity was actually very sucky. It sucked. It was constantly full of guilt. I couldn't express myself because I didn't know who I was. I was this religion. It was so miserable. At 19, can you just imagine? That's like a child. It was awful. And I knew the only way out was to commit suicide. I was emotionally bankrupt, couldn't handle it anymore, and was willing to give up the entire, my life. So, man, I saw therapists, which when I would talk to them, I could just tell they didn't know anything about what I was doing and dealing with. It was all kind of out there stuff. They were really nice people. They just had no clue what I needed to hear and how to describe and how to get me out and how to talk to me and They just didn't know what it felt like at all, and you could just tell they had no freaking clue. Which is why I always recommend you see a therapist who's been addicted and been out. They know how to get out. They've gotten out themselves. They're no longer defined by addiction. They don't call themselves an addict. It's hard to find. But they do exist. They're usually in AA. But then again, that's a whole different story. I really do like AA. I've been myself. I'm not an alcoholic, but, you know, I understand how that works. So, the moment I healed was the moment I actually let myself feel that incredible weight of pain and anguish that it took for me to forgive myself of all those sins that I had committed that completely conflicted with my religion and my upbringing, conflicted with my parents' belief system, that I was going to forgive myself, which dismantled that total belief system. And faced my fear of just my body, which was my addiction, really. All of my behavior was a byproduct of being addicted to the body as an idea that I could use my body to heal from my depression and my anxiety. Like, exercise is going to remove anxiety. Yeah, it did. But ultimately, by needing exercise to deal with anxiety and to deal with depression, it became something I had to do as an addict. The dopamine center of the brain, blah, blah, blah. To feel good about myself, and it did work temporarily, but it created a huge hole, a huge grave for me that I didn't know how to get out of that route. You know, when you think about the intricacy of depression and all the things that go into creating that brain environment, if it is circumstantial, which most of you it is, you just may not know it yet, it's almost hard to just peel it apart, you know? So for me, it was just letting myself face the murderer, face that nightmare, physically go through panic, physically go through fight or flight, as if it really felt like I was truly going to die, and going into pain. No one recommends to feel pain. They all say medicate, do something about it, don't tolerate it. And why? Why can't we tolerate discomfort? And the more you run away, the less you have you have a sense of capacity. So by allowing yourself to feel emotionally distraught, allowing yourself to feel vulnerable, allowing yourself to feel sadness, pain, and pain that doesn't feel like you're capable of tolerating, like death, the death of a loved one. Accept and have the grief of it. Until you do it, you don't know what you're capable of. So by turning your back and running through whatever means, whether it's healthy or not, is almost enabling you to not feel the confidence you need to get through the next stage in life. So it is my belief system. It is my experience, and it doesn't have to be yours, and you don't have to agree with me. Why don't you go ahead and just click dislike? I'm cool with that. I accept it, and I like you anyways. In fact, why don't you all just push dislike? In fact, that is great, because if you push dislike or thumbs down on this, that means that you're listening to me. I've got nothing better to do. In fact, I've got allergies, a sinus problem. I've got 2 dogs I'm taking care of. I'm the only person working in the clinic. My husband's in Alabama. I'm at home with 3 kids alone. I've got construction going on in my house. I'm restaining my banister, painting the banister. And I could give a shit what you think. But this is what I would suggest. And I suggest this with everybody, my friends, my family, and anybody who's dealing with depression. Don't run from it. Just let it be. There's something to say for having the humility to say you're not better than what you're going through. That you can actually accept what's required to go through pain. Physically and emotionally and spiritually. Let yourself dismantle any false belief system. Let yourself be aware that your depression may be because of a belief system you think is holier than thou. Maybe that's the problem. Who knows? It was for me. And I'm so glad that I did it. Because now I know what I am capable of. And let me tell you, bring it on. Bring it on. Never been an addict since. I am not addicted. I've never been depressed since, and let me tell you, it was severe. So anybody that tells you once you're depressed, you're always depressed, it's just never ever really been through it and allowed themselves to feel like shit. Feel like shit. That's the way to get out of it. At least it was for me. It was for me. Get help if you need to. Talk to someone. Get in nature for sure. Just get out and breathe some fresh air and cry. Cry it out. Take my information with a grain of salt. I am not a therapist. Talk to someone. And if you feel like they don't understand what you're going through, find someone else. But ultimately, it's your job to heal yourself. It's your job. And if you can do it without having to go exercise, without having to go get your nails done, without having to go shopping, without having to go watch porn, without having to go eat, without having to go diet, let's just keep on listing. Doing your yard work, reading a magazine. If you can do it with nothing, then it's yours, and you can rewire your brain to know it can have more leniency when you're dealing with change. I say this with love, people. You can do it. If I can do it from the depths of despair that I did, you can too. Just you find what works for you and do it. Alrighty? Can't wait to see all my dislikes.